Welcome back to one of the most diverse, colorful, thrilling, and historically preserved parks in America, the St. Louis Zoo. It's been quite a few months, but so far I've taken you under the waters where sea lions fly above, took you to share the cold with puffins and penguins, and briefly showed you their newly improved bear complex. Now to the hidden corner of the zoo, the nearly 12-acre River's Edge, the largest complex in the park. It opened in 4 phases from 1999 all the way to 2014. Though the St. Louis Zoo impresses with its nearly century-old attractions, not much of it can be considered natural-looking. The River's Edge was built to be just that, and it's always been described as the zoo's first Emergent Exhibit. It's a very lushly planted environment that takes you on a journey to follow a mythical continuous waterway from start to finish through 5 separate sections representing 4 continents. With most animals that aren't necessarily aquatic, but rely heavily on the flow and the height of the rivers for survival. I don't know much more about the history of this exhibit, so let's begin. Even with a map, the River's Edge isn't exactly an easy find. As advised in the park, you're told to follow the footprints, and eventually you won't have to follow the sights, but rather the sounds. The attraction begins by putting its name into perspective with roars of several cascades, the start and tip of the river's flow, that's intended to loosely appear as if it goes into every enclosure. Welcome to the first section, the 2002 established South America. Although the River's Edge is the largest part of the zoo, every section is relatively short-lived. The first bend takes us to one of the 3 attractions within the River's Edge that opened at the same time in 2014 during construction of the bear habitats we saw last time, so some of the other bears had to go somewhere. The first one is the Andean Bear Range. It technically touches the other 2 areas, but they were designed so you'd see each one at the beginning, middle, and end of your journey. These spectacles, excuse the pun, were a no-show, so hopefully I'll be able to cover this species for a later video. A little further down is the Backwaters of the Amazon. This little pocket was once home to the little-known bush dog. Kinda wish they were still here, but they were replaced with the capybara, the world's heaviest rodent. They have webbed toes, and its nostrils, eyes, and ears are set on top of its head so it can smell, see, and hear while swimming. It used to live behind its current home, and one thing that makes the River's Edge so special is you can see 2 separate exhibits placed in front and behind each other in a few cases. That back enclosure contains their former neighbor, the giant anteater, who also didn't show, so we'll just have to also save them for another video. Next starts the African section. More specifically, the flow brings you to the banks of the savannah. Opened the same year as South America is the Rhino Reserve, a rolling, narrow habitat with several vantage points that allows you to see sacred ibises and the eastern black rhinoceros. Because of their endangered status, the St. Louis Zoo is part of the species survival plan to manage a healthy black rhino population. Right now, there's around 60 of them in 26 American parks. 10 total have been born at the zoo, and that does include Ajabu's and Katie Rain's 2-year-old calf named Moyo, whose name means heart in Swahili. Coincidentally, if you didn't know, this video's release date is/was on 2019's World Rhino Day. In between the Rhino Reserve's main viewing spots, behind you is my personal favorite on the edge, the Painted Dog Preserve. Of course, it's home to the African wild, or more colorful term, painted dog. Or you can also call it by its other name, according to 8 of the locals, a prairie dog. Prairie dog. They are Africa's largest canid creature. They have long, slim legs, rounded ears, and beautifully modeled coats of brown, black, white, yellow, and even red. They have 4 toes on their front feet rather than 5 like a dog's. And unlike most social creatures, the males are the ones that stay in the pack post-maturity, while the females leave to join a new group. The Painted Dog Preserve was the second of the 3 habitats that opened in 2014. It's roughly 5,000 square feet, offers 1 viewing shelter in the middle of the space, but thanks to its narrow design, it's almost a guarantee that you won't miss them. The savanna then continues with another beautifully covered paddock, this one appropriately filled with tons of mud. Say hello again to the red river hog, the world's most colorful swine. If you've been a subscriber for a couple of months, you would know that we sort of already ran into these guys. So if you want to know more about them, click on the card above. Though it is worth mentioning here that they do share their space with a small predator, the bat-eared fox. Although allegedly in my eyes, because in my 4 visits that span through 7 years, I've yet to see them. The savanna then concludes with a well-planted, mesh-fronted aviary that contains red-billed hornbills, superb starlings, red and yellow barbets, and Kenyan crested guinea fowl. But this lush representation of Africa does not end there. The 3rd section is the African Nile, now where we get to see the true inhabitants of the rivers. Welcome to the Hippo Harbor, the most lively section on the edge. Added in 2001, roughly 3,500 square feet, a perfectly divided amount of land and water space, exactly 50 feet of glass that makes up this beautiful panorama, allowing you to see a lazing but still beautiful ballerina and 60,000 gallons of water. The hippos are the 3rd largest land animal, second to rhinos. They usually weigh between 3,000 to 4,000 pounds, but some males have been known to reach 9,000. In note to the 2 intoxicated gentlemen, the fish aren't here for the hippos to eat, and also note hippos do not hunt humans for consumption. Anyways, they are built for the liquid lifestyle. You may have heard that hippos can't actually swim, which is true, but it doesn't exactly mean they'll sink and struggle underwater. Their blubber and holding their breath makes the animal buoyant, so it can lazily drift during its time through the water. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the St. Louis Zoo is home to all females, and up until 2015 that included the much-missed Bibi, who was transferred to my hometown at the Cincinnati Zoo, to which she then gave birth to one of the most famous animals to ever live. Despite her departure, she should have immediately felt at home in some way, because the St. Louis and Cincinnati Zoo's hippo habitats are almost identical. Moving on, but the often credited world's longest river does continue. Past the train tracks are 2 rival predators. The first, in a habitat that I believe blends in perfectly with the backdrop forest, contains the cat-related spotted hyena. They didn't show much of themselves either, so we'll move on to their neighbors across the road. This is a 16,000 square foot yard, the 2nd largest on the edge, and is a very fitting home for a very fast animal. There wasn't much of them either, because I believe the zoo was working on introductions. But at the end of their habitat is another example of the zoo meshing 2 enclosures together with vantage points. This time, another predator lives in front of them, the little tiny dwarf mongoose, the smallest predator in Africa. The African bends, ends, but the flow goes geographically to the right to begin Asia, the area with the least amount of species but at the same time covers the most ground. And it kind of needs to be if it wants to display animals like this. Welcome to the Lords of the Forest habitat, home to the Indian elephant, second only to their African cousins as the largest animal on land. They can still get up to 7 to 12 feet tall and weigh between 6,000 to 12,000 pounds. Their skull alone makes up 20% of that body weight. It's well known that elephants are social creatures, living in groups up to 2 to 20 individuals, averaging 7 per herd. The St. Louis Zoo is home to 9, 8 females and 1 male. But unlike our trip to Houston, we're not going to focus on identifying each one of them, because other than a few exceptions like Donna and baby Priya, I can't. So I'll talk about the history and layout of the facility. In order to do that, we kind of need to talk about at least one of them. In December of 1992, the zoo welcomed its first elephant birth, After 43,000 votes, he was named Raja. The day he was born was also the day the zoo decided it was time to start planning for a new facility capable of keeping a full-grown bull at the park. With the river's edges opening in 1999, Raja was not only able to stay ever since, but the zoo follows size regulations big enough to allow them to have a growing family. A lot of times, elephant bulls are kept from others in zoos because in the wild they mostly live solitary lifestyles. But that is not the case here, as Raja does in fact live with all of his companions. But this doesn't look like much now, does it? I mentioned many months back that several of the St. Louis Zoo's individual exhibits are labeled like separate attractions. This here is the Lords of the Forest, that's 16,000 square feet. Then there's the second one, the Elephant Oasis, 18,000 square feet. And the third, 24,000 square foot Elephant Springs, distinguished from the rest by its roaring waterfall, grotto structure, and an unusually shaped feeding tree. But there is actually a fourth yard called the Elephant Woods, an area that's considered to be behind the scenes, only accessible to guests that ride the train that briefly passes by. It's mostly secluded, peaceful, and a place for the elephants to get away from the crowds. I used to think that the elephants only had access to one yard at a time, but after standing around long enough, I discovered that they have access to all of the yards at most times. So together, the St. Louis Zoo's elephant facility totals to be around 3.5 acres. They all comprise a pachyderm playground. They're varied in topography, offer several water features per exhibit. The elephants are challenged to climb, explore, and test their physical capabilities, and the surrounding areas make them appear as one of the more natural pachyderm enclosures around. Though this sort of acts as a finale, we're still not quite at the finish line just yet. Located next to the second elephant yard is the last of the 2014 enclosures. It's the smallest of those homes for the smallest bear, who again never unfortunately came out of hiding. We saw rhinos, wild dogs, hippos, and elephants, the wild sides we're not so used to seeing. So now it's time to go local and take a stroll along the streams of the last section in North America. It first shows you an open outdoor tank that bleeds into a stream that flows into a small riverbank, but the true finale lies behind it. Disguised as a large bat cave, the river's edge closes with a peaceful and memorable underwater look at the Missouri and Mississippi River Aquarium, home to several local fish including gars, bluegill, catfish, and much more that live in a single impressive 33,000-gallon tank. As described by the zoo when it first opened, the river's edge is a dramatic, multi-species emergent habitat that blurs the boundaries between the animals and zoo visitors, taking the concept of natural displays to a whole new level. And for a 20-year-old display, in my opinion, each and every enclosure still holds up as if it were all brand new. As you exit, I want you to consider and remember one thing from all this. To remember the delicate balance between humans and wild animals along the river's edge. Thank you for watching.